All opinions expressed on Crosstabs are those of Brian and Reagan and do not reflect the views, thoughts, or opinions of individual legislators or the Legislative Assembly. Relax. Some things are just for fun. Guests likewise join the show to express personal views and opinions. We desperately hope they say something funny or entertaining, but thoughts shared, whether entertaining or stultifying, are those of the individual and separate from any role or a title a guest may possess. Enjoy the show, or don't. But don't go whining about it if it's the latter.
We're cleared to engage. Time on target. 5 mics. Out.
So now the listeners are coming on board, so it's great.
Yeah. Well, welcome to Crosstabs in the Capitol. We have with us State Representative Greg Smith of House District 57 for almost your entire tenure. You had one, I was looking on Wikipedia before we came in here, you had one year in House District 59, which is now Vicky's district.
You know what? I forgot about that. You're right.
Yeah.
When I was first elected back in 2001, it was District 59.
Yeah.
Hey, and to bring that in full circle, who was your campaign manager at that time?
That's right. That's right.
Who is now the representative for House District 59?
Yes,
That's kind of crazy.
Vicky,
I didn't know
Vicky
that was the
got
case.
me across the finish line. Yeah.
She tells people sorry all the time.
right.
I knew a lot when her and I first started dating, which was probably in 04. Yeah, it would have been 04. She hated me in 03. Started liking me in 04.
Okay.
And then we would talk politics because I was working at that time. I was working for President Bush and doing some stuff in Oregon and things like that. And then Vicky was she was back home and she was like, "Oh, I'm involved in politics," and she was, and she said, "Oh, the first real campaign I did, the one that I liked was Greg Smith." So
Yeah.
I think she did a few more before that, but I don't know. Ted Ferrioli, I'm not sure she was super excited working for Ted.
Right.
Just kidding. Hopefully he doesn't listen. But no, great to have you on board on the podcast.
Let me share with you really quick
Yeah.
with Vicky. The one thing just astounded me. I couldn't believe it. Is she got Congressman Bob Smith, retired Congressman Bob Smith, to come up to Prineville and to publicly endorse me. And
Wow.
that was all her. That was all her.
That's-
When she said,
I didn't know that.
yes, yeah, when she said she was going to do that, I was like, okay, yeah, let's see you pull that off. By golly, she pulled it off.
Well, one of the things you probably didn't have in that first campaign was social media. But the thing that reminded me that we should come interview you is you're doing these a lot of direct to camera videos. And I don't know if I've seen you do those before. I feel like that's pretty recent. Tell us about those and what got you doing that.
Well, it is pretty recent, and I wish I could take credit for it, but it's actually my son, Ryan Smith, who is over here in the room with us. But he just recognized that there's a better approach, and that's a more direct approach, and letting folks see you rather than just sending stuff through social media where it's just words.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think that kind of goes, you have the new strategy, which is obviously the social media and the video direct to camera, but you're still sticking with a lot of this old school. I actually saw your staff was working on this giant mailing out to your district, asking them, 10 different questions for the session. And I don't know, it's been a long time since I've seen them do it old school like that, right?
Yeah, most definitely. And so we just got done sending out darn near over 4,000 survey questions out to folks in the district. And we wanted to hear what they think. And with that, in the survey, I shared what my position was and then asked them, do you agree or not? And it was really helpful because, with 10 questions, you're not going to agree on everything. And it gave me insight as a representative to what folks are thinking. And so, yeah, we mix it up. We do birthday cards. And this was taught to me by a gentleman by the name of Ben Westland, who worked with myself and Tim Knope, and
Who's that guy?
yeah. And these guys, they showed me, they said, you know what? People want to know you care. And I genuinely believe that.
Yeah, Vicky does some of the birthday cards. Jamie Kay does them, but Vicky will get the random nicest emails from people. Oh my God, I got your birthday card in the mail, and
Yep.
and she was like, oh wow, that's really cool. It gets a little harder now with they're kind of hiding the birth dates and stuff, you know, when you
Right.
register to vote, but they still have to put the month, which is kind of nice, and it's the thought that counts.
Right.
How much of the responses come back with you know, FUs and screw off or I hate you?
You know,
Is it about what 5% usually with I didn't vote for you, I don't like you anyways?
you know, when you get just one,
Those are the
it
best.
feels like it's 1,000.
Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Because,
Yeah.
you know, everyone in this building is here for a reason. And when you're from Eastern Oregon, you're here because you want to take care of your neighbor. You want to take care of your community. You want to take care of your region and natural resources and all that. And so when you do get
It bums you out a little bit, doesn't it?
it does, because
Yeah.
you're trying so hard.
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest part about it, especially when you have such a huge geographic district.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
very difficult to go from, I mean, you touch Clackamas County to
Yeah.
almost the Idaho border, really, for I mean, you go to what, Umatilla probably, right?
No,
Somewhere.
Freewater.
Okay,
yeah.
well, yeah, you go
But
pretty
it's
far.
a big,
It's a
long
big
district.
And it's hard to go find somebody in the nooks and crannies of that district because literally there's a lot of nooks and crannies.
No, you're exactly right. We're representing over 19 cities, which is really hard because every one of those cities has a mayor, they have a city council, and they have their school districts. And so it's really challenging to be everywhere and to represent each of them. But we try to get out there and do our best, but it is hard.
You're always, I used to see it was always Team Smith. That was always the mantra
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
So it is nice to see more Greg Smith.
Yeah.
So I think the video
is.
stuff is great. I think that's a cool way of doing it. Nobody's really doing it. So I
I
think it's always
know.
finding something that somebody else isn't doing. Because if everybody does if everybody does newsletters all the time and they do massive amounts of news, like, you know, Gomberg puts one out every day, you know, if
Darn near.
yeah, darn near. Yeah, he's prolific. That's for
Yeah.
sure when it comes, but it's what he's good at. And now people come to expect him. And I think
Yeah.
what I always try to tell representatives or senators, it's like, do something you enjoy doing,
Right.
do it well,
Right. Yeah.
but don't try to do everything.
right.
Just do something, but be focused on it. And I guess that would be my question: is like, what advice would you give or have given to the new? Because I mean, you know, without saying you're the old dog.
I've been here a while.
Yeah, you've been here a while. So yeah, what's that advice do you kind of? Because I would imagine people come talk to you and ask you, you know, Representative, how do I get funding for my community? How do I know how to vote?
Right.
You know?
Right. Well, in this building, I found there's two groups of people: those who are loud and those who are effective. And we need loud people in this building because we need to stand up and tell folks what we stand for and what we won't stand for. So that's an important role.
Mhm.
And then you have the effective side. And I'd say Vicky is very good at the effective, but she can stand up and hold her own. But on the effective side, you have to decide, you know, am I going to try to navigate bills? I'm going to try to work them, negotiate with them. And that's one of the messages I share with newcomers. Are you going to be loud or are you going to be effective? And both have a role here. But you have to decide which one you're going to be. Because if you decide to be loud, you're going to be able to get your message out. But in terms of working with the Democrats, they'll just put you in a corner. I mean, if I came down here, pounded the table and told them what they're going to do, they'd say, well, thank you, Rep Smith, go sit in the corner. And so you have to decide.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, we have, especially since COVID, it's almost like 2/3 new, at least in the House. The
Yes.
Senate and the Senate turnover because of the walkout. The Senate's going to turn over a lot, and so I think there's going to be a lot of people sort of making that choice. And I think my observation is a lot are picking the loud, but there are a few that are going to pick, you know, working the bills, and it's going to be interesting to see how that sort of sorts out in the next few years.
Well, Tim, your pop, he was very effective at both.
Yeah,
Very effective. And when I say loud, I'm not meaning screaming or yelling, but getting your opinion out. your message out. And Tim was really good. He was the master. He was the master. And I would even say Vicky is our house leader. She was very good at it. She was very good. And for freshmen coming in, they need to decide that.
You don't need to suck up to her just because I'm in the room, but that's right. No, I think you hit it on the head. For me, I think you, especially the two types of that is, I think, profound to tell somebody, because it's all, and it's slightly easier to be loud than it is to be effective, because being effective means that you're trying to solve a problem,
and quite often for your caucus members,
yes, even harder, right?
I cannot tell you how many times I have casted a vote to help a member of my caucus, to make sure that they had, support from a fellow member. And that's part of that approach. You have to do that sometimes if you're going to support your caucus, support the party, and at the same time support your district.
Yeah.
I want to kind of pivot, because obviously a lot of what you deal with is budget. You've got, I think, maybe General Gov sub. You're obviously the co-vice chair, full Ways and Means. You're in capital construction, so you're seeing a pretty good chunk of the whole budget. Not every subcommittee, but I'm sure you're seeing a lot of what comes out of there. You're talking to your colleagues on those subs. There's the budget in Oregon, which is a complicated 2-year budget approach, and also we have this new monkey wrench that's being thrown in from the feds, because we have about 30%, 31% of our budget is federal funds,
right?
And we don't know how many of those federal funds we can rely on. So is this the first unique budget you've dealt with, or have stuff like this occurred before?
Back in 2003, we had to go through. We were going through a major recession. And so we had to deal with significant budget reductions and roll back the size of government, which I think is good.
Yeah.
So now with what's going on at the federal level, yes, it's going to impact Oregon, but it's going to be a chance to reduce the size of government. And we have to prioritize. And it's interesting because I serve on the Revenue Committee, I serve on Ways and Means, but I also serve on the Audit Committee. So I kind of see all three of it. And I think if we work smart, there's an opportunity for us to reduce the size of government, and at the same time start prioritizing what we should be focusing on.
And do you think that happens a little bit in every agency, or are there big programs that we need to start winding down or reduce how big they are? I mean, where do you think the savings comes from?
Well, I could tell you where we could find $200 million immediately, and that's, let's get rid of the state carpool.
Yeah.
Why is the state in the carpool business? We have private sector businesses that could do it much better than we're doing it, and yet we are. Right there's $200 million.
Why do you think why do you think DAST runs the motor pool? What's the argument for having it?
Oh, I think it's just government control. I think it's
just give them Uber vouchers, it'd be cheaper, right?
Exactly. That's serious. If we really look at it in today's world, in today's society, the state motor pool is just unnecessary. Now, that doesn't mean the state won't need some cars.
Right.
They're going to, but running a full motor pool makes no sense. And by the way, that idea has been circulated for the last 24 years that I've been here. Wow. I remember as a freshman, my forefathers and foremothers wanted to do that. And they got close, except for at the time, John Kitzhaber was governor. And so Republicans controlled the House, we controlled the Senate, and we were aggressively moving to get rid of the carpool. But the governor had other ideas.
Doesn't it, with the budgets, with agencies and stuff, I just feel like the scope creep has gotten so far with so many agencies. There's so much overlap amongst them with that scope creep. It's almost hard to look at a spreadsheet and say, oh, if, ODOT is doing this, but that's a bad example. OHA could be doing something, and you got a whole nother agency doing something that OHA is kind of doing the behavioral health stuff that we're doing now. I'm sitting on some of those, that task force with Senator Anderson and Senator Lieber, and we're trying to figure out, and the silos inside that alone of $1 billion is insane. And you learn to find out that there's 16 different agencies doing something in regards to mental health.
Right.
Like what?
Right.
What is that? I don't know how you unravel all of that. That's the difficulty, right?
I would share it, and this is going to be very blunt. It may offend some folks, but I can tell you, every one of those agencies you could cut by 5% immediately. Just cut them.
Mm-hmm.
Just cut them. I mean, just cross the board cut, and let them figure out how to manage the reduction, because they will. If they're running the department, they know it better than I do. And what you do is you say you're now going to operate with 5% less.
Yeah, to start.
And
let me be very clear. I'm saying just to start. One of the things I tell folks is when Republicans take over, and if I get to have a role in the budget, very first thing I'm going to do, and I'm looking you all in the eyes, is cut 5% immediately.
Yeah.
And then we'll start digging into the budgets and look at that scope creep, and we'll start determining, are those activities, are those policies, are those directives doing what the legislature said they're going to do, or are they kind of zigzagging off and picking up other activities? And you hit it on the head. We see that all the time.
Well, and you have two different pieces. You've got policy and you've got budget. You can pass a policy all day long that says we're gonna send somebody out to check the water usage of every farmer, and we're gonna close their farm if they go, a drop over their water usage. But if you don't fund any positions for that, that doesn't happen.
That's right.
And so there's the two pieces there where the budget's actually a very powerful tool, and I think you're seeing a lot of that get leveraged in DC right now, where they're leveraging control of the budget, and they're actually kind of, Senate Democrats are basically trying to decide, do we shut down the government, and what happens if the government shuts down? Will they be able to cut more or less? They don't really know. And so they're debating inside their caucus. Literally, I was just reading about it right now, about if they're going to shut down or allow the CR to go forward. And that's going to be, that's a huge conversation. That conversation trickles down, because now if you shut down the federal government, there's money that may be promised that's supposed to come that doesn't show up when we need it. And now, was 2003 the budget reduction session where they did like 9 special sessions to work on the budget?
I don't remember.
It was either 01 or 03, I think.
It was 03. I remember that. I think it's 7.
7, yeah.
But we just kept coming back because the forecast just kept demanding. I'll share this with you. In 2001, Republicans wanted to enhance public safety. Mm-hmm. And so we set in our budget approximately, don't hold me to the number, but like 122, we funded 122 state police officers. Okay. Mm-hmm. Republicans said we need to get more police on the road. So we funded it. We sent it to Governor Kitzhaber. He wouldn't hire a single person. And so that goes right in line with what you're talking about, the power of the budget. And I can tell you, if I get an opportunity to control the budget and bad policy comes, we won't fund it.
He just said he's running for governor.
No.
He's running for co-chair.
There you go.
Co-chair. Yeah. And then a friendly governor. And it'd be slice and dice time at that.
Well, and we need to. I mean, my goodness, we fund so many things that are not central to what government should be doing. Yeah. And we need to pull back on that.
Well, and one of the things I tell people too, and this is probably one of those things you put on that list to tell new legislators, is actually we don't need to pass a single policy bill. There's no constitutional requirement for that. Show up, pass a budget that balances, we can go home. That's the only thing that we're required to do. All the policy that's extra stuff.
You're exactly right.
Well, and we've always said too, and Reagan's actually the one that really talks a lot about it. You put Republicans and Democrats in a building for 6 months. They're going to argue by the time we get to June, right? There's just no way you can put, and not even just Republican Democrats, leaders from their community that are Republicans and Democrats, and some that yell and some that are effective. And there's no way by the time we get to June. And the problem with this, there's some of these policy bills that just hang around long enough. And I think the legislatures that have been more effective, and I think there's constitutionally, Reagan calls for 100 days every year, would be a lot easier. If we just came in 3 months, 90 days, and one was policy and one was budget or what have you, and like Montana does that, I think you get a little less because we come in, we have a job to do, get out.
Yep.
And I think we're sitting here yelling at each other, and we can be nice in our committees right now, but now all of a sudden somebody doesn't get their bill heard by chamber deadline and they get pissed, and you know, and now that person's bill comes to the floor and they write a nasty little thing about their bill on the floor, and you know, but 6 months is a long time.
It is, you know, and you're exactly right. I mean, just think about when we were kids and parents would take us on a big long road trip and pack us all in the car. It's the same thing. Yeah. And so, you know, and then what happens is the temperature starts increasing, and people become more anxious, as you're talking about, and they realize, you know, July 1st is coming, or July 10th, whatever that day is, and their activity may not come to fruition. And all of a sudden, you know, they get angry, they get hurt feelings. And you're exactly right. Within that 6 months, you're going to have tension.
Yeah, you can't help yourself. What? All right, well, we can wrap up budgets with this prediction. What's your prediction on
the May revenue forecast? Will be up
because we can't do anything about federal, right? I mean, we're not. That's not our job. But assume it stays somewhere around where it's at. Maybe we get a 5% reduction.
Yeah.
What's kind of your gut on budgets for us this session?
I think the state budget will continue to increase, even though population in Oregon is stable, not rising. Yeah. As a matter of fact, we're losing Oregonians. My prediction is the May forecast will be up. My guess is we will have a status quo budget, basically just where we came in. It's probably where we'll end. You know, in session, nothing's going to change. I think you'll see a few minor reductions from the federal government. And I shouldn't say few. I think you'll see a number of them. And of those reductions, I think a lot of them will be positive. I mean, the reality is Republicans believe in less government. And so as co-chair, my goal is to keep government efficient, but at the same time, look for ways to reduce it. And that's what President Trump is doing right now. That's what Congress is doing, the Senate. And as that filters down to us, that's my job, is to fight for that.
And my biggest question will be, of the federal dollars that they lose, because there's going to be the revenues continuing to go up. And I think even if you just did the current service level for every agency, or you do 5% reductions, even to give yourself a little extra operating room, they basically have to decide, do we want to backfill these federal programs with state dollars, or do we want to do some of the new stuff that they're proposing in some of these policy bills that are going to need funding? And they're going to have to choose. And I think it's just going to be interesting to see what is prioritized from presiding officers, what's prioritized from co-chairs, and what are chairs going to run out everything just down to Ways and Means and let it decide, or are they even going to pull back and say, actually, we're not going to send everything that we want to do to a fiscal and force the co-chairs to kill it or whatever, right? Or we might actually hold back on some of that stuff ourselves because we know we don't have the dollars.
Let me share one thing as well. You know, when you're in a position on the budget where you're able to make decisions or be part of that decision making, many folks come to you with requests. And one of the things that I'm having to remind my colleagues is our goal is to reduce the size of government, not fund more government. And that's just the reality. And some folks don't want to hear that, but
Representative, I got this great project at home, but and then Congress is the same way.
Exactly.
Right? But I got this thing, and I agree. And we've been pretty vocal about it. And I've been pretty vocal. If we're going to be successful, President Trump's going to be successful, and we're going to be successful here, everybody's got to take a haircut.
Darn right.
That's just the way it is. I mean, it's easy for you and I to take a haircut. We got great hair.
Right.
But, Reagan's going to have a problem.
Right.
But, and I think that's the reality. Some things have gotten too long. And
that's good.
Yes.
I mean, that's a basic Republican principle that we want to reduce the size of government. We want to put, decisions in the hands of people, parents.
Yeah.
And if we have to reduce programs, that's a good thing.
Yeah. It's especially for two guys. Of course, you went to Barlow, so you're not quite as good as the guy that went to Gresham. But, understanding those core Republican principles.
You know what? I'll never forget. I got to tell this. So my senior year, we're going into the Barlow Gresham game at Gresham. And you have to understand, when Barlow and Gresham play, people show up.
Oh, yeah.
And those stands were packed. The track was full of people around it. Barlow was coming in heavily ranked in the state and number 1 in the district. Gresham was number 2.
Oh, wow.
We're playing Gresham. We are up late in the third quarter by 10 points. And God dang it, those Gophers came back and beat us.
Oh, man.
And I will never, ever forget just playing in an environment where so many community members came together.
Yeah, it was epic battles. I mean, I'm a few years younger than you, but not by a whole. But my brother was older, but those Barlow Gresham games, whether it was basketball, soccer, football, baseball, I mean, it was fun. The community showed up for those rivalries. And I love those rivalries. And we usually won.
Yeah, once in a while. Well, I mean, it was because you had Gordon Russell Middle School and you had Dexter McCarty were kids. Some of them went to Barlow, some of them went to Gresham, and so they knew each other. And it helped them create.
I went to Dexter, and yes, about half my buddies, depending on where you lived in Gresham, went to Barlow. And you're right, yeah, that's a good point. I really thought about that because we all knew each other.
Exactly,
played together in middle school. Yeah,
I remember in that game. I know we're getting off topic here, but we'll tie it back to politics. Tackling a gopher and realizing it was my best friend in middle school. And anyway, so how that relates to government, government's like a football game. You have folks on both sides and the Democrats are trying to move this ball forward and grow government. And us Republicans, we're trying to push them back and say, no.
Well, my dad always said that you always, even when he was opposing on any issue, he always treated his opponent with respect. Because on one issue in the morning, you're fighting, and then that's your ally in the afternoon. And so if you didn't treat them with respect, you weren't going to get what you needed from them when you guys were working together, right? And
Tim was the master.
A lot of that on the political level is not everything breaks down R&D. The big stuff a lot of people see, this ag workforce board thing that's happening, obviously that's kind of breaking down some on partisan lines a little bit, but some of these things you find you see some of these issues.
I can see the canyon, Reagan. It's
right.
Easy to see on that.
There were not a lot of Democrats testifying in opposition, but you see that, but then they're sitting next to you in subcommittee later, and you guys agree on this cut that needs to happen, right? And so, as long as we do that respectfully, I think there's no issue there. So. I think that
I've seen two approaches on this. So I've seen Mike McLean, who would go into a negotiation with Governor Kotek, then at the time Speaker, and Mike had a way of being very gentlemanlike, but the governor, Tina at the time, would just get red-faced. And, oh, my goodness. And then I had a chance to work with Vicki when she was the Republican leader, and she had a different approach. Vicki was very logical and very persistent, and it worked. And now,
Rayfield just caved. That was pretty much the when he
and then I wasn't in the room when Tim was Republican leader the first time. The second time I was, and I'll tell you what, Tim was one of the best negotiators I've ever seen. because you're right. He knew how to be very firm and just say, we're not going there.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the next issue you're negotiating, he would try to find, a good solution.
Yeah.
And he was the master at being strong, but realizing you don't break up friendships or relationships.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's probably the best advice and especially with Senator Knope, when I learned that a lot with him, was really finding allies where you didn't think allies existed.
Yes.
Right. And so those are only because you built relationships, and you don't know that somebody who you go to battle with on a gun bill.
Yeah.
But you know what? You might see eye to eye on a tax bill.
Exactly.
And it's an oddity that I think only exists inside Capitol buildings or congressional buildings, because I get it, right? But I think that's something very hard to explain to people outside of the building. Is that I need Prozansky and Tim Knope, for instance, are not going to ever agree on a gun bill,
right?
But they probably agree on no tax on tips.
Right.
And Senator Anderson's in that boat right now. Like, he signed on to Senator Anderson's no tax on tips, but there's no way Senator Anderson's voting for any of his gun bills. Right. So, just two completely different issues, but you're looking for different outcomes and affect different groups of people. So.
Well, and when you're in the minority, it becomes even more important, because if you want to protect your district or minimize what the majority party is doing, then you have to build those allies and you have to build those relationships. And, for some folks at home, that's really challenging to understand. But our job as representatives is to take care of our folks.
Yeah.
What do you think about submitting CapCon forms that cut programs, say defund projects? Have you ever seen that?
I have only once.
No way.
Yes. And I'll give a name on this, because he'll be proud. One of our new representatives, Representative Juncker,
of course, yes,
he sent me a list of projects that need to be reduced. And
at least he did his work.
I have to tell you, I kind of respected the thought that, he was looking for ways to make government a little smaller.
In 24 years, what most recently it was Dwayne Juncker. That's crazy.
It is. And actually, truthfully, that's the only one I remember. That is the only one.
What, so I think we'll kind of clear up the ending here, but I wanted to give you a moment. You were talking earlier before we hit record.
Yeah.
I'd love to say the Eastern Oregonian did an editorial and had a difference of opinion. And I think you felt pretty comfortable with where they're at. I know that you've done a lot. I do a lot. I get hit up by newspapers all the time. They blast me because I do campaigns.
Sure.
And when I do campaigns, I ruffle feathers. And when you ruffle feathers, it kind of freaks people out a little bit. So you do other stuff too, because this job doesn't pay enough to do what we need to do. So, and I think, I know I'm not going to say him because he's on our hated list, by the way, your best friend. But I just a moment, like, where are you at with everything that happened?
Sure.
And I think most people know what happened. I just want to let you clear the air, and I might have a question or two afterwards.
No, that's awesome. So first of all, let me give a little bit of background and help frame the conversation. 25 years ago, well, actually 30 years ago, as I was coming out of college, I knew I wanted to be in economic development. And so I was fortunate enough to go to work for the Port of Morrow, which today is the second largest port in the state, billions of dollars of assets. And Greg Walden came to me, and Mark Simmons came to me, and Tim Knope came to me and asked me to run. Well, I run for the legislature and I get elected. And so now you've got a state rep working for a public agency. And I just didn't want to be there. So what I ended up doing, and this is a long time ago, I went to the Department of Justice, I went to the Ethics Commission, and I asked a question. Is there any reason we can't privatize economic development? Why does it have to be run by the government? And they came back and said, you're right, you can do it. Now you have to follow the ethics laws, but you can do it. And so it makes me curious that my colleagues might scratch their head on the fact that I'm privatizing government activity and doing it more efficient than the folks in government. And play through this. They pay me approximately 60% of what they would have paid for employees in government because they don't have to pay my benefit package.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I privatize economic development. We grow our company, where at the time we were, I could argue, the state's largest economic development firm in Oregon. And all of a sudden I start becoming criticized for what people would perceive as, hustling money. Well, what I would share with folks is anyone who runs a business knows you have overhead, knows you have employees. Well, every one of those offices had employees. Every one of those offices, I had to pay rent. Every one of those offices, I had to pay utilities. And so this notion that I was just making all this money tells me people don't understand business. Because at the end of the day, I privatized economic development, which I think is a good Republican principle. I was able to create good family wage jobs. And when I say good, I paid high wages. I never wanted to be accused of not paying high wages. And so at the end of the day, my goal personally was to earn 30% on a contract. Okay, so 70% is going out the door for expenses. All right, so this leads to a lot of conversation. All of a sudden, the Malheur Enterprise decides to really get involved. This is about 5 years ago, and they just start stirring up an issue in District 57. Now, keep in mind, the Malheur Enterprise is hundreds of miles away from my district.
Yeah, right.
Okay, they're hundreds of miles away. Anyway, they start stirring this all up. And, when you have a newspaper printing something, sometimes people believe it. Well, I'd tell you this, there is a thing out there called fake news. And I'll tell you what, I genuinely believe that's what occurred in my district. Then, now let's get to your question. Then there was a question about the operation of the Columbia Development Authority. And I won't go into too much detail on it just because of time, but I would genuinely share with you, I can look you in the eye and I can tell you as the executive director, sometimes you have to be the one that takes responsibility. And sometimes you have to be the one that takes the heat. And so when what one could argue is an error occurred, even though you had nothing to do with it, sometimes you have to take responsibility. And that's what I did as the director. Well, so this gets blown up. It turns into Greg, has done X, Y, and Z. And it was actually my wife. My wife went and did public record searches. She went and dug and started finding different messages of pre-planning my firing, but they wanted to do it with a public humiliation. And the reason they needed to do this, and I'm digging down a little deep, but it tells the story. Probably 3 months prior to this activity, the board decided to divide up 9,000 acres of industrial land, prime industrial land, and my job was to execute that. Well, 2 of the board members didn't want that to happen. And so what's the best way to stop the splitting up of industrial land, which I'm responsible to do, and I'm going to do it, is to get rid of me. And so that's what happened. Well, back to my wife, she went and uncovered all these different messages demonstrating this malfeasance, and brought it forward to the East Oregonian, and they sat on it for months and months. And, all the while I'm taking a beating, and they're sitting on this information. Well, the East Oregonian then decided to, finally run a large investigative story, of which they told the Mount Here Enterprise, "You're not doing this correctly," and they reported that the board perhaps needed to take responsibility, not the executive director, and that was pretty powerful. Then on top of that, the story went into the ethics violation that everyone blew up, and everyone thought, it was more than it was. Well, the director of the Ethics Commission made statements to the East Oregonian saying, listen, this was a very minor issue.
Yeah.
It was the lowest issue that could make the Ethics Commission. And at the end of the day, all they did was gave me a letter that said, hey, in the future, this is how you do it.
And I would beg to say that 90 members in this building, if you followed them every day like a traffic cop following you around, you're going to break some law.
Something
right. And with the ethics and the reporting requirements and stuff, it's very murky. Right. And I bet all 90 have misfiled something, so that part I think is just truly silliness, to be honest with you, because I think, like you said, that was a very minor thing. Now, if somebody has a problem that you have contracts and you run a business outside of you being a state representative, that's their own, in my mind, that's their own. There's people that don't think I should run campaigns.
Exactly.
But but that's their opinion.
That's right.
It's not against the law. It's a private company. I also do marketing and PR for private firms.
Exactly.
Mike's Fence Center is a client. Are you going to come after me because I help a fence company be a better business?
Right.
Like, no. And campaigns are completely separate. They have nothing to do with what we're doing. And so these firms that hire you, they could choose not to.
Very much so.
They know what they're getting.
And
they
every
know what
contract, they can fire me immediately.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why that's where I have a problem with it I've always had a problem with it is I think you have one person that has an axe to grind.
Right.
Because they think it's fun and they just hate you individually, but yet they need to sell newspapers or whatever they're trying to sell. Right. Clickbait.
Right.
All that sort of stuff. Which I'm sure your son knows about clickbait. That's why he does all the headlines, right, on all your videos, right? Clickbait. Yeah. So I appreciate you being honest with it. I think this stuff comes out, makes a big difference. The stuff that comes out. Sherry obviously loves you to death. Thank God for her.
Yeah.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
Me lucky for Vicky. I'm not.
Well,
your wife isn't very lucky, Reagan. I don't know.
Do you know the one question no one ever asked me?
What's that?
Is, do you have any private contracts? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah. So folks are focused on one little business side of the business, of which I have employees, which I have overhead. I have a whole other set of contracts as well in the private sector.
That was my point with the whole, I got other clients, I do other things.
You hit it right on the head. Yeah. And, President Trump, he has government officials that stay in his hotels. He has contracts with government agencies. And the reason he does that is because he can do it more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
He can do it more efficient. And I would hope we would encourage more privatization of government. So,
boy, howdy.
Well, and I think some people even, think podcasting in the building isn't, legitimate. And I'm like, how isn't it legitimate if we're providing literally more transparency than you get? Right. People, it's so funny to watch them argue the public transparency stuff is like, well, if we don't stream the meeting, it's not transparent. And I was like, what happened before streaming? Was government not... Was there zero transparency in government? And also, let's think about what we do in the public here in the building and then what everybody knows happens behind closed doors. And somehow it's totally fine to make those decisions behind closed doors.
Leadership meetings? I'm with that.
This is a great one. Amen. This is a great one. You'll remember this. My dad told me about this. He said minority leader, I think it was Merkley at the time, they had public caucus meetings. And then as soon as they took the majority, weirdly, the public caucus meetings stopped. And
I remember that.
And so that so much of this stuff is how you look at it, or really just about pushing your agenda, and you're using quote unquote transparency this was an argument at
Arizona has. Remember we were down in Arizona?
Yes.
They said they had public caucus meetings. They still
Yes.
do.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guarantee they don't say everything in the public caucus.
Some
Right.
counties still only do telephone for their meetings, and not all of them stream it. And some of them are pushing to stream. And they're like, well, the legislature streams all their buildings. And my response to people on that was, the legislature is one of the least transparent places of government there has ever been.
Yeah.
Just because you say we stream all the meetings and post all this stuff, there,
Right.
amendments can show up 4 hours before, and we go to 1 hour notice on meetings. Like, there's been stories of committee meetings that have happened in the middle of the night before the internet. I mean,
And I've been those.
Yeah.
I've been in committee meetings out, I can't remember the exact time, but let's say 1 a.m.
right.
Wow.
And all of a sudden an amendment shows up, yet you got it 1 hour before, but let's be honest, it's 1 a.m.
Yeah.
I'm an old man. 1 a.m. is late. And so all of a sudden this activity's going on. You're right on the mark.
Yeah.
One of the other things about transparency is I am such a strong believer in the First Amendment. I believe in the First Amendment.
Yeah.
I when media calls me, I take those calls. Even when they're rough calls, even when, you're just like, ugh, here we go. But
Rep Smith, I heard.
yes, but when you receive over 400 complex public records requests, 400,
Wow.
that's more than the governor receives. And every one of them is by one person. And then if you look, people go look, there's over 50 plus news articles on Greg Smith by one person. Just this week, this person did 2 stories in the newspaper on Greg Smith, did it on Tuesday and did it on Wednesday. At what point does this not become creepy?
Yeah. Oh
That's
no,
a
you
good question.
it is creepy. You've crossed the line.
Yeah, and actually, I'm just going to say, well, I'm not going to because I don't need him doing silly stuff. But when the Malheur Enterprise is asking me for my medical records, asking me what prescriptions I take, that crosses the line. That's creepy.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's weird.
When he's asking where my wife was, that's creepy. And so this is what I'm dealing with. And unfortunately, he's spreading it throughout the district, and I have to manage it.
Yeah.
So the best line, and you probably have it. You were in a meeting and you said or I won't say his last name. You offered to buy his newspaper.
Well-
And I thought it was one of the best. And you probably know that story better, but it
Yes.
was so awesome.
Well, here was the thing. He has his newspaper up for sale.
Yeah.
It's for sale.
Yeah, I know.
He's advertising it. And so I offered to buy it. And my intent literally was to hand it over to one of my employees who at the time was the past editor of the Wallowa Chieftain. So she had experience.
Yeah.
And a second one of my employees was an employee of the Malheur Enterprise that the owner fired. And so I had 2 people ready to step in, take the paper over, and turn it into a real paper.
Right.
Which these days that'd be a pretty big news organization. Too.
Right, right. So it was for sale. I
Especially
made an
around here.
offer.
Yeah.
I had employees I was going to put
That's
in there.
funny.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, I get criticized.
Well, I know we're way over time, and I think you've got some constituents that need to
I
meet with
do.
you.
I
So
know.
we really appreciate you being so generous, and hope to have you back. And if you've ever got something you want to talk to Oregonians, listeners, tabbers, I think is they're calling
Yeah.
themselves, listeners
Yeah.
of Crosstabs, just let us know. We'd love to have you back.
It's been cool. You guys are doing a fabulous job. The notion that we can just have an open and honest conversation and know that it's a chance, again, to be transparent and get it out to folks.
Absolutely.